All right. Well, I'm
Well,
excited about giving this presentation with you today, Blake, running a top-notch IT department. Um, so it seems like we've spent most of our lives in IT departments. Is that the case, Blake?
yeah, for sure. I started working in IT when I was about 15 for a guy named Ian MacRae in Fishersville, and kind of went from there. Worked 10 years in a large enterprise level IT department for a large nonprofit organization, which is interesting because all volunteer work. We were full-time volunteers, so staffing was a little bit interesting, but we made it work. But it was still large, multi-thousand users, 100 sites globally kind of organization. So it was an experience for sure. And now I'm back here working for Ian again, doing marketing.
Really cool. Um, so I guess the first IT department I worked for was my high school
Mhm.
when I was also about 15. And then I worked as an intern at a local college and a local um, telephone company, and then started Eaton Computers when I was somewhere between 16 and 18. I sort of started it while I was going to high school and then did it full time when I was 18. So um, we just had our, I guess it's our 23rd year anniversary this October.
Mhm.
We probably should set off some fireworks or something. Um, but in working, I know you've worked with Eaton Computers as well as in the past some other uh, IT support vendors, and um, we're usually working either directly with users or we're part of the IT team and we're working as part of an IT department. Um, or we're having some of the things that we're talking about as issues within our own department. Um, so um, I was interested in putting this presentation together with you. Um, so let's get started with the top four problems. What do you see as the big areas that we're going to be talking about today, Blake?
I think in your experience, you've seen that these are kind of the big things that an IT department needs to do in order to be successful, and also the big things that can cause problems for an IT department. So we have strategy and budget, staffing, help desk, engineering, and security and compliance.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Max, for joining us today, and for all of you that are watching. Feel free to raise your hand and bring anything up. We're going to have a pretty simple format today. Um, so let's get started with strategy and budget. So, what are some of the top problems we see with strategy and budget?
I think the biggest one is just running out of knowledge. When you have a smaller team, it seems like you can run into places where you just are kind of out of your depth, either individually or as a team. So what have you seen that can be done to fix that?
Well, I think the biggest one that I've seen is just having a supportive environment for the IT staff. Having managers that are overseeing IT, that are viewing their IT teams as an asset, and their continuing education is really unique to that team. And things like licensing and certification as an asset versus I have heard of some IT teams where their certifications are treated like a liability. One nice thing that we have at Eaton Computers is, the partnerships with some of the vendors that like Microsoft or Cisco that really promote the certifications. So it probably took us though 10 years to really get us to a point where um, it was just ingrained in our culture that people got certified. And it took management support. We provide a $4,000 training and reimbursement um, budget for employees every year to really get those trainings and certifications, um, you know, completed. Um, so I think that that's, a big part of it. The other thing that I've seen that's really helped for us is having strategic partnerships. So there's a lot of things that we do all the time, like, Office 365 migrations or migrations to the cloud, or, installing new phone systems or networks. But there's some things that we don't do all the time. And finding a consultant to help us with those things, that, for us, it might be, how do you build a help desk?
Mhm.
We're not, we do operate a help desk, but we operate only one help desk, and we um, are just like our clients that operate maybe only one set of network infrastructure. We're sort of limited by just what we know. So, having those strategic partnerships that give us perspective, if we press this button, what happens?
Mhm.
And then lastly, talking with both the IT team and with the users about what's expected. I think you know people are always changing the way they work, and what is maybe comfortable for us in IT today, maybe old hat when people are working differently with consumer technology at home. So I think
Mhm.
it's really important to just have that mindset of continuous improvement.
Yeah, that's one thing I've appreciated since coming back to Ian Computers is how willing you are to, engage consultants and learn things about what you don't know already. It's something that seems to be missing in a lot of companies, but it's it's an investment, not a line item on the budget. Um, Next, I think we're going to talk about long-term planning. It seems like in a lot of teams you get kind of a jumping around from project to project without a lot of vision and strategy. So what can be done to overcome that?
Yes. Well, I think it all starts out with a job role. I think the main challenge that I think we all face is that usually planning is not the top thing on our um, job description. It's often people are looking for IT to keep things running, help users. Um, those things are sort of the top of mind um, deliverables that we're looking to give. So we just quite frankly often don't have the time really set aside in the calendar, and we may not have time from our peers. So if we're reporting to the CFO or the director, um, is that director giving some time on a quarterly or annual basis to work with us to develop a plan?
Mhm.
Is there a place where we can brainstorm with our users and get some feedback as far as what we want to do, um, beyond just IT for the sake of IT? Of course, we're going to keep the network on, but is there some sort of a task that they're clicking through manually, or having to print something out and then scan it later, that's burning up a bunch of their time that we don't know about? So I think just having that buy-in across the organization, having the time set aside, really is a big um, part of it.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that leads right into the next point, which is best practices. So it's kind of two issues there. One is not knowing what the best practices are, and then two is being able to implement those across the organization. What do you how do you see that that problem could be solved?
I think this is probably the most frustrating piece for most IT professionals that I talk about, because usually I would say they have a pretty good innate sense of 60, 70, 80% of the best practices that they should be doing. But what really happens is it's kind of like the planning. It's like, well, you're asking me to support users often, you know, more than just business hours. You're asking me to set up systems, often after hours. Um, and now I've also got to manage change to implement best practices. So, I'm going to have to flip us over to Office 365, which is a new environment. But now in the process, I'm going to have to set up two-factor authentication, which nobody is familiar with. Well, I can't do both of these things. It's just too much. So I think really, having some maintenance windows, both with setting expectations with users, training users, as well as implementing these changes is really helpful. If we can get everybody on board that we do have to implement some change throughout the year, that we're not going to just throw that change management into some big project, which is already big and complex and confusing enough. We're going to really put aside some extra time for change management, and get that management buy-in as part of that quarterly annual plan as far as what we're going to be doing with the change management. I think that's really the big thing. I think otherwise you see IT professionals just frustrated in their department, saying, well, I've been telling everybody here for years that we need to get away from the password, and we just have not had a chance to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Our next problem that we see, and I know we've talked about this a lot, is poor value for IT services. So one problem is that maybe we don't know how much we're paying for everything that's going into IT, and two, we don't know if that's the right amount to be paying. So what's the solution for that?
Well, it really feels like it's multifaceted. I think the first thing is that IT really needs to understand what costs are in their budget and have some control over it. And the first challenge that I see is oftentimes IT expenses are spread out across multiple cost centers. So you might have the folks in accounting who just signed off on the phone and internet bill without consulting IT. You might have clerical workers doing a manual process, which could be automated. And then lastly, you might have the IT expenses themselves, the salaries or cloud services tools that maybe IT has a direct view into. So I think really getting all of those things measured and understood can be quite challenging. So I think that really having a leader in IT that is working with the rest of management to really work on things like automation. We see so often that organizations have great IT professionals on their team, but those professionals are so busy chasing just keeping the systems running that they don't really get a chance to raise up above those things and focus in on automation.
Yeah, and I think that also goes with the last problem here under the strategy category is ad hoc funding. So maybe your IT department just comes to the business leadership every so often, says we need a pile of money to fix something, or it kind of, it's not well tracked throughout the year, throughout the life cycle. So what's the solution to that?
Well, I think we're always surprised when people, they'll put down $50,000 for a project and they feel like they don't need to budget for that $50,000 again in 5 years. That just because they bought some equipment, that they don't have to plan for its replacement. So I think fundamentally getting that in place, but also getting IT out of that reactionary mode where the CEO just came back from the trade show and bought something, and they can really plan for it, or worse yet, the organization just got hit with ransomware and now we're scrambling for a security project. When we see folks in that more reactive mode, they're often incurring both the cost for the new thing, but the cost to remediate the old thing. And then often they're buying the new thing under duress. So they're not maybe making the best decision because, they have to scramble to get the new solution in by Monday when everybody comes back to work. So they're not able to really go out and look for, the 3 quotes or maybe buy the ideal technology, they're having to just sort of make do. So it's almost like you end up paying 3 times. You pay once for fixing the old problem, once for the new problem, and to implement the new, and then the third time because it never really was implemented right. It wasn't the right solution. So it just can really add up.
Yeah, for sure. So moving out of the IT strategy category, let's talk about staffing. Staffing can be one of the biggest expenses, is the biggest expense when it comes to IT when you're doing it in-house. So one of the big problems that I think all of us IT folks are familiar with is specialization. I know working in an enterprise environment, things got extremely specialized. We had people that worked on just the access switches. We had people that worked on just the storage, just the messaging, which doesn't really happen in smaller teams. So how can the smaller teams solve the lack of specialization?
Well, that's a real challenge. And really, we started out with strategy. Obviously, everything does start with strategy, but strategy in and of itself is a specialization. You're not going to get strategy right unless you've done it for a while and maybe have some blueprints or coaching around it. So I think it's really having defined roles, being able to coach people into those roles. I think outsourcing is something definitely that we use. For example, we have some pretty sophisticated tools for patch management and scripting. We're managing 2,000 computers, but I have one guy who is in that role. It's a big part of what he does, but he does do other things. So he can get in 20-30% into a problem, and it then starts becoming very labor intensive for him to fix it. And now we're subjecting our users to being a guinea pig. I really need to outsource a tier 2, tier 3 support for that tool. It's just too complicated of a tool. It's basically all of the group policy Active Directory hooks into thousands of machines and servers. There's a lot to go on, a lot to get right, a lot to get wrong when you're managing that as an overlay. I think outsourcing really helps me put, a leader in that space. I think when we work with bigger IT departments, we see, like you're saying, I think you have a org chart here.
Yep.
We see these basic roles needed in an IT department. And I really like to think of it first and foremost. I often see these roles used interchangeably, but having somebody as a chief information officer, I really feel like that's not something that you can outsource. And then a chief technology officer. Technology is pretty commonplace across one industry to another. We all utilize mobile devices, and we all utilize, customer relationship management systems. We all utilize clouds and servers, but what data we put into those systems is very unique to this, to your industry. If you're a library, you're going to have different data than a healthcare organization, and but both a healthcare organization and a library are going to run on an IP network. So I feel like the CTO role is one that certainly is something where you can get some assistance, you can get some outside help with. You don't have to reinvent the wheel with that. It's a lot harder in the CIO role. That's somebody that really has to specialize in that industry. So then if you look under the org chart, really that information management role is what kind of goes into the CIO support, the information manager. And then the rest of these roles are fairly generic. IT asset administration, licensing, looking after the network infrastructure, the infrastructure manager, operations support, that's your help desk, IT projects. So any one of those, you can have in-house, you could look to maybe outsource it. Certainly some industries get more specialized with risk and compliance, but a lot of the risk and compliance is also fairly generic across multiple multiple categories. If you've done one HIPAA compliance thing, that's fairly standard. But the types of information that may be going into the electronic health records is going to be very different from a dental office to a long-term care facility. But both of them have to have passwords.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Now, along with that problem of lack of specialization is retention. So we know some IT departments have a lot of turnover. They have trouble attracting the right talent. How do you see that can be solved?
Well, I want to really ask you, Blake. You came from an environment where there were a lot of volunteers working. Was there more turnover or less in that type of environment with a lot of volunteers?
That's a little bit different environment, but yeah, it was less turnover than you'd think there'd be. I'll put it that way.
That's pretty
Um,
cool.
but I think it's because we were able to specialize, and we had very defined job roles. So you knew what you were going to be working on. You could focus on that job. There wasn't a lot of out of subject things that you had to get into that could affect your job satisfaction, basically. So it was a very good environment as far as that was concerned.
Yeah. So I know at Ian Computers, we often challenge our staff because we do support so many different types of organizations. So even if they're really strong with technology, they have to be also strong with the human element, going from one client to another. There's going to be a lot more exposure to different personalities, different company cultures. And although we're good at documenting, you can't always document how the cultural aspect. And I see that being a challenge that's kind of unique to our business. But for many of our clients, there can be we can sometimes get in confidence from the IT team that there might be a mismatch between the expectations around the overall organization and then the IT team in particular, because management just doesn't know how to manage IT. And that can be frustrating, as well as just the prospects of not having a career path. So I saw it in our organization when we were 5 or 10 employees. It's only so far you can get. If you get to a point where you have a tier 1 and a tier 2 and a tier 3, and you have a projects team, and you have a security team, and you have people that can specialize in different roles, you're right, it's a lot easier for people to feel like they belong, and they can really be an expert in that role, and get the support they need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, one problem that's common to very small organizations that maybe have one IT person is a single point of failure. You have one guy, and what happens if he's not available? What happens if he wants to go on vacation, or wants to move on to another role? What's the solution to that?
Well, I know that can really burn people out as well, because then you know nobody wants to be on call 24/7. So we have used outsourcing to help with this. But outsourcing, sort of at its core, is also about documentation and cross training. So if Joey, who looks after our automation tools, goes on vacation, we have Sierra Pacific Consulting, who is Joey's kind of tier 2 for our automation tools, but we have to have that documentation cross training. We're meeting with Sierra Pacific every 2 weeks. We have all the tickets. We've got a portal where we're keeping things documented. We had an onboarding process with them to really get in and understand the environment. And then we have also internal cross training with Andrew, who looks after that tool. So whether it's a tool or if it's a one-man shop and, the help desk is going on vacation. It's all about getting some other folks involved.
Mhm. Yeah. And then, of course, like you mentioned, being that single point of failure, whether you're the one person on the team or you're doing one thing on the job, can lead to burnout. It's a common thing really across the industry. So what do you see as a solution to that?
Well, I mean, we talked about a lot of the things covering it. I think some more diversity in IT would probably help. Yeah, resetting user expectations is probably a big part of it. We do, I guess it does feel like often just users come to IT with some magical thinking sometimes, and that can be really stressful.
Mm-hmm.
But it'd also be good to see more women in leadership roles. I think it's helped in our team as we've gotten some more diversity over the years, to just, not everybody's, kind of type A and looking at the thing in the same way. That's, I think, been a help.
Mm-hmm. So moving out of the staffing category and into help desk. So for all users, I mean, the help desk is kind of the face of the IT department. If the help desk isn't working, then as far as they're concerned, no one in IT is working. So it can be a really big problem for many organizations who have, I mean, small or large help desks. I mean, ran into it at the 50,000 user level. We had a poorly run help desk, and everybody decided that they hated us. So once we revamped that and made things work better, everyone was a lot happier with how the IT team was running. Some of the core problems that we saw were accountability. So not knowing who was responsible for what and when. So what's your solution to that?
Yeah. The help desk is usually the 800-pound gorilla, the 800-pound tail that's wagging the dog. It just it shouldn't be the first thing, but oftentimes I'll talk to an organization, I'll talk to them about how they define IT, and all those other things we've been talking about don't even really come up. It's really all about the help desk. And like that is 80% of what they think about when it comes to IT. Mm-hmm. And it really should be, the help desk is where you treat the symptoms, not the problem. But the symptoms can be pretty severe. So I think fundamentally, when we talk about burnout and setting customer expectations, it's probably that shoulder tap culture. It can be really hard to get away from that, where IT is just left constantly running from one issue to the next with no safeguards, no insulation on their time, and no way to really push back to management, which is often the problem, and say, hey, I worked on printer issues for 20 hours last week. Can we stop buying $100 printers? Whatever the issue is, they're so busy that they're not keeping tickets. They're not able to record how many hours they spend on some of these things. And then oftentimes when you bring that issue up to the IT person, they often look skeptically at that, maybe knowing they don't have the management support, and say, well, what is that extra record keeping or documentation going to really do for me? Maybe they even feel like they're going to be, their job is in jeopardy if they document, because they're so in demand. Mm-hmm. So I think it's, but that's also going to be the first step for them to really elevate themselves to looking after the data that's in these systems versus just keeping the systems running. Mm-hmm. If they can get some support to get the help desk monkey off their back, mm-hmm. It's a big win for people in IT.
Yeah. And the second one is poor issue resolution. So we're not talking about problems here, I don't think. We're not talking about one-off things. I mean, anybody can unjam a printer. We're talking about failing to find the root cause or find patterns in the issues that the help desk sees. So what do we do to solve that?
Well, oftentimes it does involve some level of documentation of what the issues are, some way to escalate issues to maybe a tier 2, to get some extra perspective, escalate issues to a manager, and then ability to fold those results into a planning session so that we can then knock out those issues during a maintenance window, or get buy-in from management to actually spend some capital on some sort of a project.
Yeah, I think being able to track those things, like you said, I unjammed a printer last week, but I unjammed every printer in the organization twice last year. Knowing that is going to lead you to a different outcome than just keep doing it again and again and again.
Right.
Mm-hmm. The next one is poor support coverage. So I guess this is questions that don't get answered. This is issues that don't get resolved, unavailability of the help desk person. What can go into solving that?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times in small teams, their management gets frustrated that that there's limited capacity. Well, I call my help desk, but we were talking with a local organization with a couple hundred users, and management was frustrated that the help desk wasn't providing 24/7 support, but they also weren't paying for that. So it's like, well, these people also have lives, and you're putting your team on call, and then they also have projects. So even while they're there, during business hours, people are getting pulled off onto special projects and really having to work 2 jobs, the project job and the help desk job.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I think it's worse in IT than it is in some other industries, because I think so often IT people are salary, but I think that is a challenge.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, that can lead to, as we discussed, staff turnover. Help desk is a kind of a role that's viewed as something you want to grow out of eventually, right? So not either being worried about losing people or actually losing people and being stuck without a help desk, I think is a common problem for a lot of smaller organizations. So what do you suggest about that?
Well, I think one thing we look for is, both people that are looking to grow in the help desk role, but also people that are really enjoy help desk and have been in it for a long time, and maybe they want to be a tier 2 help desk person, but they're really committed to help desk.
Mm-hmm.
So we love hiring people like that. We pay them well. Understanding that not everybody on the team is going to be a quarterback. You got to have some really good linebackers or other roles on the team. Mm-hmm. And those people have also got to really be rewarded and feel like they have a career path. And if this is something where you don't have the passions inside the organizations around help desk, maybe you're more passionate about the data, or maybe you're more passionate about security or infrastructure support. I mean, this is a great opportunity to find an outsource partner that is passionate about this stuff and is really looking to deliver a great user experience to people. And it can be scary to think about that, because we all know our users really well, but if things get documented in the beginning, it can be successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. The next major category we'll look at is engineering and project management. So this is another thing that has an outsized impact on how the IT department functions and how it supports the business. I think we talked about this a little bit, but these problems that keep coming up again and again is going to be a major source of pain in IT departments. So how can that be solved with good engineering and project management?
That's right. Well, I think just having that connection between the help desk and the engineering time, and then having defined having a defined engineering role. You know, with small IT teams, there often isn't somebody who is you know, really dedicated to an engineering role. Or maybe you have somebody who's an engineer, but they're a systems engineer. So they're a jack of all trades, master of none. And that can be really tough too, where you know, you might not have a defined role for the system that you're actually working with.
Mhm. Yeah, I think we, in my last organization, we solved this by having our people that were doing project management and engineering actually help the help desk people. We took a rotation, taking escalations from the help desk. So even if we were already doing project management, just so we could keep an ear to the ground on what was going on with the users, we could keep in touch with things and then plan our projects out according to you know, what was happening on the ground.
Yeah,
That seemed to help quite a bit. Next is that the projects don't get done, or they don't get done well. You may be managing them, but where are they going? So what does how does that problem get solved?
that's right. Well, I think one of the things that really helped us with this is, you know, having a separation of duties between project management, you know, the people that are setting expectations with users and managers, and the people that are actually delivering the project. We so often see that engineers are being asked to do the project management, and that can work on some projects, but it can be very challenging because oftentimes people are, you know, also maybe in a help desk rotation, or they're in other sort of they're um, in some other roles. So we, you know, I've seen it happen. We were involved with a big website overhaul, and the company just hired a outsourced project manager just to manage that website project. It went on for 2 years. I don't know if everyone who was on that website project was, some of the marketing people seemed a little flaky, but the project manager was a rock star and kept that thing going, and got it across the finish line. So, you know, having that as a dedicated role on the team can be really helpful.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that over the years. There's kind of engineers and then there's project managers, and neither one of them are somebody that's good at one thing is not necessarily good at the other thing.
Yeah,
And just I think part of the problem is being a little too close to the issue. For an engineer, saying, oh, you know, that might take this long or that long. Whereas if you have a project manager, he says, no, you're going to get that done by next Friday, or how much time is this going to take, and then holds you to it. Having that project manager skill set in the mix definitely helped a number of projects along that I was involved in.
yeah, we would see situations where, you know, the engineer is up till, you know, 4 in the morning implementing the solution, and it's implemented, but the customer's coming in at, you know, 7 in the morning and wondering, you know, where's the update on the implementation? I mean,
Right.
it's hard to do both, you know?
Yeah. And then finally, security and compliance. I mean, this is just this is becoming the end all be all of IT here. Is keeping things secure, keeping your information in and the bad people out.
Yeah,
So one of the big problems that we've run across is poor password management, either using insecure passwords, not moving to two-factor, using shared passwords. What are some things that can overcome that?
yeah. Um, well, you know, just like in the engineering and projects role, you know, we often see that, you know, the security and the compliance, those are really two different roles. Like when you have your slide chart up, you know, really, you know, security is more of an engineering piece, and compliance is somebody who's probably more like that project manager role, somebody who can really, you know, pour through the regs and document things, and make sure that the engineering team is getting things implemented. So I think at a staffing level, we've got to get those things right, or we'll never get into details. But fundamentally, just things like two-factor password sharing, they're just systemic in our industry, and maybe we're getting it in we're getting it right on one platform, but we're still getting it wrong somewhere else. So I think really regularly talking with business stakeholders about we need to get these systems in place, having those maintenance windows, really making it clear to the users, things like two-factor or just the way we're going to have to do business anymore. I mean, I think all of us have probably clicked on an email link, or clicked on something that is suspect, and if the only thing that we have protecting us is one password, it's so easy to accidentally give that up or to trick us, let alone if we're sharing that password. Then we have all the insider threats. So I think the two-factor authentication has certainly saved people at our team from becoming compromised, because they have to get through another thing there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's basic defense in depth, right? That goes for network security, it goes for everything. You need to have more than one layer protecting you in order for things to truly be secure. But again, it's one of those things that doesn't always happen because it's hard. It's hard to implement that stuff. Next is recently suffering a data breach or a data loss. You see organizations that are maybe in emergency mode coming off a ransomware attack or a data breach. And so they want to implement security, but maybe it's not going to be a good long-term solution, or they don't know what to do coming off of that. So what's the solution there?
Well, I like to laugh and say that the auditors are coming and they're rushing. So we've allowed IT to really grow up in a very laissez-faire fashion, where there hasn't been really a lot of tight controls. We often don't have real auditors coming by to really push on things. Maybe they fill out some sort of a checklist that's fairly hands-off, or they run a little scan tool on our networks that picks up 20% of the things that could be going on. But there's big business in breaching these systems. So one thing that we do is at Eaton Computers is, again, we get ahead of this by having a regular meeting with a security consultant, so that we're talking to somebody that's not just our team, and then working to having a leader in that security role on the team as a job duty. So that's how we've structured it for ourselves. I think that the other challenge is that there's probably a lot of excitement around security when it comes to the projects that might come up, like the two-factor authentication, getting that implemented. We'll probably get some hearts racing in the IT department, but nobody really wants the job of the reviewing all the logs that you really should be doing to know whether there's a breach in place. So I think that's another thing where figuring out where that role is going. Are we going to use some tools? Like I mentioned, we have some automation tools at Eaton Computers. Are we going to use some tools to ingest those logs and make it so we don't have to look at everything? Are we going to outsource that so that we have, somebody that kind of like the help desk, looking through, having a human set of eyes on the things that kind of raise to the top after the tools look through it? That's a big issue as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to get a big project across the finish line, but it's the the day-to-day of keeping things secure that can really bog things down and be a way in, be a vulnerability.
Yeah, so everybody wants to fix the breach, but nobody wants to look at the logs after the breach.
Exactly. One of those things where if no one knows you're doing your job, then you're doing your job right.
Yeah.
Last one is concerns about compliance requirements. So this is an ever-shifting landscape. You have the old stalwarts of HIPAA and PCI, but then new things pop up in new industries where the government or a trade organization says you need to do these things to be compliant to keep doing business. So what's the solution to maintaining compliance?
Well, I mean, this is one area where it often seems like people are selling compliance magic bullets, and a lot of people buy them, and they never have to shoot the gun, and they have that false sense of, yeah, we're compliant, but we go back to the number two, which is the breach. Oftentimes, the people that are really doing the in-depth audit are the Russians, not not your accounting firm that comes by with somebody who just took a security course after being an accountant for most of their life and is checking a box that says that you've got some backup in the cloud that they really have no way of testing.
Mm-hmm.
So we see a lot of we see a lot of these people sort of buying a hamburger when the reg is actually calling for a filet mignon, and it takes a lot more time and a lot more money to really get in and do some of these compliance things right.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it's really a whole new role on the IT team to have somebody that is willing to do the writing required to document what's taking place. And that, to stand that up is probably a full-time job for most organizations for months, if not quarters, just to get all the policies and procedures documented.
Mm-hmm.
So often we get just we buy a template, we lightly edit the template, we put it on the shelf, and then we ignore it. And maybe that'll pass through some of the compliance checkpoints. We can show them the template, but is it really going to do anything when the Russians come and audit us for real?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like what you said here. See the rest of the presentation. So
Yes.
Security is, like you said, it's compliance with a reg isn't something you just buy off the shelf. It's something that you have because you're doing everything else in your IT department and your organization correctly. And then you're documenting it.
Yeah.
And you're making sure it keeps happening. So I think that's everything we have for this. Any concluding comments?
Well, I'd love to have some feedback from those in the room about the presentation, or any real world questions, anything you guys think we